Hello, my lovely creatives. Welcome back to another journal spread. This is the Shaker Journal. I absolutely love this thing. We are going to do a new spread today. Here I've just got a couple of pages. One is just a piece of paper that used to be a flyer, and the other one was a piece of a yarn catalog. I did do the gesso, just plain gesso, not with baking soda. And I'm starting with some gelatos. And I purposely did not use the baking soda in my gesso because I kind of wanted the the water-based colors to float on the top and not really absorb into the page. Sometimes it's easier to move them around that way, and that's what I wanted with this spread. So I'm using a baby wipe to mix my colors here. Because I didn't use the baking soda, I don't want a whole lot of water on the page because it takes forever to dry when it doesn't soak in. Plus it tends to run off the page, and that can be irritating. So we're going to do a landscape today. And I'm being really loose with this. I have a vague idea of what I want to do, but I haven't planned this out whatsoever. And we're going to put a castle on a cliff back here. Now, I'm not being detailed with this. I'm not trying to be realistic with it. I'm using my watercolor markers to get some darker colors and not really more detail per se, but a little bit crisper than what you can get with the gelatos. So here I'm just blending the markers, the watercolor markers. I'm not using a whole lot of water at all, just enough to blend it so you can't really see the lines quite so much. So now we're putting some forest in the back, and I'm using a gray because colors are duller in the background than they are in the foreground. And I'm just making squiggly lines here. It kind of reminds me of, when you see the heart monitor and it's got the little red line that goes and then it blips. That's kind of what I'm doing here. It's just making those little blips. And I'm coming in with a dark green now. This is kind of a bluish green. And we're just kind of going to add layers of forest here. And I'm smearing the bottom to bring the color down and to make it less focused. Because the farther away things are, the more they blend together, they're blurrier, they're not well defined. Now this is a shade lighter green and more of a pine green than the previous green. And again, there's no detail in here. These are just scribbly blips. Especially in the distance, you really don't need detail to make something look, a bit realistic, because your eye's going to fill in, your brain fills in those details. And here I'm just basically bringing the color down so that when I put my foreground in, there's not going to just be blank white space. I don't do a whole lot of landscapes, but they are fun once in a while. And now I'm taking my lightest green and just filling, and again filling in that color just so it's background. Sometimes things look really complicated, but they aren't. They're just simple. It's just layering. So I'm using my Polychromos colored pencils here, and I'm putting in the basic outline shape of a castle on top of the cliff. And I'm using a gray-blue because, again, things are duller in the distance, and with the light from the sky, it's going to look more washed out than it would otherwise. So, and really, I just did some shapes. I left a couple of holes basically to simulate windows, and I'm taking my black and just doing a couple of spots here and there to give it some definition. Here I'm deciding what I need to put behind here because I need to do some more dark colors in the cliff, but the page was really soft and I needed to put something behind it so I could draw on it without going through the page with my pencil. So this basically is just giving more color and shading to the rocks. Again, that is background. It's not going to be the focal point, so I'm not worried about putting in details. So here we go with the main part of the show. I've got my acrylic paints and we're going to put some ferns in. And I'm just starting with the center part of the fern, just figuring out where I want this to go. And now I'm doing the shape of the fern. And what I'm doing is basically just dotting. I start at the tip and I dot, and then I press harder toward the center and then lighten it back up toward the other side. It's just dots, dot, 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 dot. It gives that nice kind of lacy effect that ferns have. So I do a lot of ferns and I do this for a long time, so I'm not going to show you the entire process because, you know, you get it. You just dot, 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 dot all the way down the line. I'm going to do this in 3 different colors. I do the darkest color first, and then I do a medium green, and then I do this kind of gold. I took a yellow ochre and I added a little bit of green to it to give it a greener tone. And I just layered them all on top of each other. So now I'm going to take my acrylic markers and I'm going to put in the absolute foreground. This is the focal point of the whole piece. And these are going to be mushrooms. Now because I did the ferns in the back and I did them in acrylic, I do have to go over the colors several times, some more than others, to fully cover the ferns. I could have done the ferns in watercolor and they would have been easier to cover. However, when you go over watercolor with other things, it can smear, it can lift off, and basically become a nightmare. And you're going to see that right here when I do the pink and I go over the watercolor marker. It's smeared all into the pink. And I was suddenly very glad that I'd done the ferns in acrylic. Now it takes me a lot of layers to end up covering all of this watercolor marker completely. So PSA of the day, sometimes it pays to plan ahead. And I have a little bit more of a kind of realistic style background, but I want my mushrooms to be whimsical. I like to combine realism with whimsy and with folk arty type things. I really like the contrast and the juxtaposition. I used to think that I had to choose between one or the other, that something had to be all realistic or all whimsical. And once I started combining the two, I was really, really happy. I used to think, even until very recently, that I just didn't have a style, that I would just, experiment with everything, but this really is my style, the realism combined with the whimsy. I do other things, but this is, I think, my favorite. This is what I like to do the most. And you can create really neat things without being realistic with it. I mean, you can just, these are simple shapes, and I'm keeping my mushrooms really flat. I'm not doing any shading or anything with them because I want them to, be such a contrast with the background. Like, art can be anything you want it to be. I'm part of a group. Um, we're doing a challenge, and someone came into this group and said basically that she joined the group just to have a relaxing time, but everybody was posting their stuff and everyone was so talented, and she felt that she wasn't, and she wasn't even gonna bother to try. And that made me really sad because the point of art isn't to impress other people or show off that you have talent. The point of art is to enjoy making art. It doesn't matter how your skill level is, it doesn't matter, what your stuff looks like compared to somebody else's. The whole point of art is to enjoy creating something. I mean, this is a reflection of you. Maybe your skills aren't where you want them to be, but everyone starts out at the beginning. Everyone. Like, don't compare your beginning to somebody else's middle or somebody else's, advanced artwork. Everyone appreciates art for what it is and where it is. Well, I can't say everyone. There are some people who are just, jerks. And they're like, you have no talent, you shouldn't even be doing art. And they say that because they're insecure about their own artwork. Yeah, don't listen to those people. Some people who say that don't even do art. That's the weird thing. They're like, you're not any good. And it's like, well, where's your art? Well, I don't do art. Well, then you really don't have a leg to stand on, do you? I think everyone should try to make art. I mean, for some people it's not their thing and they have other things that they do, and that's totally fine, but so many people are afraid to make art. They think it's going to look like a 4-year-old made it. And you know what? Who cares? Jackson Pollock made a whole lot of money just dripping paint onto a canvas. I got my little mushrooms. They are so fun. And seriously, it takes no talent to make these mushrooms. You just make a little mushroom shape and you color it in. Really easy. I'm outlining with my Micron pen. I really do like outlining things for definition. I've heard that you should never outline your stuff. I've heard that from art show judges and professional artists. And I took that seriously for a long time, but I always loved it when I saw other people do it. And one day I decided, you know what? I think it's great. I love it. I've seen professional artists who do it, and I'm going to do it just because I like it. Your art is your own. Don't let anybody else tell you what you can and can't do with it. Now I do have a blank spot behind the mushrooms on the right page, and I did that intentionally because I like to have a place for the eye to rest. If things are too busy and chaotic, it's kind of makes me crazy. And I like having this space because that kind of emphasizes this is the focal point. And then from there, your eye travels to the other mushrooms and up to the castle. So I did leave that spot blank intentionally. I'm getting my scrapbook paper and making a couple of mushrooms out of the scrapbook paper because I like the pattern and I like to have, even more depth. I'm creating more depth with this. And it just adds interest. And it's fun. I like to do things because they're fun. People should do more things just because they're fun. We have such a serious work culture. It's like you have to be working, and if you have a hobby, you need to be making money off it. Forget that. That's nonsense. Do stuff because it's fun. You only get one life. Well, if you believe in reincarnation, you get more than one life, but this is the only life you're going to be conscious of, so, enjoy it. I love the little chevron pattern there. I love how this piece turned out. I like the castle in the background, and I like the forest, and the ferns make a really nice backdrop for the mushrooms, but oh, the mushrooms. I love them, love them. They are so fun. I really appreciate whimsy in life. Things that are unexpected, but like in a pleasant way. We all have unexpected things that are not pleasant. So I'm dropping some shadows in with my Stabilo pencil. And I'm mostly staying underneath the mushrooms. I'm not going too much on the caps of the mushrooms. Just enough to make it stand out and bring those forward from the painted mushrooms. Now if you look at the sky, you can still see the yarn catalog underneath the yellow. I did consider trying to cover that, but A, I was just frankly too lazy, and B, it adds interest and again gives that right hand page more of a place for the eye to rest, and then you get pulled over into the chaos. Or it could be the opposite for some people. If you're attracted to chaos, you'll be attracted to that left hand page first. Now I have to put some dots in because I like circles and dots. I've had pieces that I've done where I unintentionally did more realism than I wanted to, and there wasn't anything whimsical about it, and then I added dots to it, and suddenly it became a really fun piece. And dots are so simple, just make some circles. Now because the background is busy, you can't see the circles in a lot of the places until you get close up to it, but that's okay. Sometimes it's one of those things like, I know they're there and that's good enough. So now I'm going to put my words. And I did letter these by hand. And it took a while. I like to letter things by hand sometimes. And that's going to cover up some of that yarn in the background too. And push that farther away so it's not right in your face. And this is pearlescent liquid acrylics. And I'm just going to put some dots on this pink mushroom because you can still see that watercolor marker that came through from the background. This helps detract from that. Plus it adds a little bit of sheen and shimmer. I do like shiny things. Shimmer, shimmer. And yeah, it's finished. I love how this turned out, and it's so simple. It looks complicated, but it's not. It's just layers of simple things. And that's all you have to do. Super fun. I absolutely loved it, and I hope I inspired you. Thanks. I'll see you next time.